What's up, Otaku fam? We are the Otaku Couple back with more reactions here
like
for
this?
the channel with more abroad in Japan. It's been a while since we did one of these videos, but this is I think his newest video that he's released on his channel, and Ren was really excited for this one, really wanted to check it out. So we're going to check it out for you guys while we're recording ahead of time for our planned vacation, which at the time of this going up, we probably are already on our vacation. So, you know, a little break from the Dragon Ball Z Bridge. You guys are still going to get a lot of Dragon Ball Z Bridge this week because we wanted to get through the season 1 as quickly as possible anyway, so hope you guys are excited for that. We have I Made the Worst Mistake in Japan. Japan Etiquette Disaster.
Oh no.
Well, we know etiquette's very important over there, so this is bound to be interesting. Thank you guys for the continued support. Be sure to comment, like, subscribe, and go check out Abroad in Japan for all things Japan that we love.
And we're going to go.
One day. We're going to make it there one day. Let's hop on in.
You seem to portray yourself as Mr. Perfect when it comes to Japanese etiquette. So tell us, what's the worst thing you've ever done? Worst thing I've ever done? Nothing. I'm Mr. Perfect. Well, except for that incident at the sushi restaurant and the highway toll booth and the awkward moment with Ken Watanabe. All right, I might have screwed up a few times, but there's no shame in making mistakes if you learn from them. Regret is a slippery slope.
Just
so
facts.
today, I'd like to share with you 3 terrible stories of the worst things I've done in my time living in Japan. Stories that I've never talked about. One is a faux pas, one's a serious language blunder, and the other is just outright criminality. But wrapped in each mistake, there's a cultural lesson on what not to do in Japan, or certainly what not to eat. And we start with the story of how a language screw-up saved me some money, but also cost me my shame.
Language barriers.
So the first mistake I made is unique because I didn't realise I'd made it until 2 months after it happened. When I came to Japan, I didn't know any Japanese, apart from the basics like konnichiwa, arigato, and
One more French.
yeah, all the basics. I made every effort to learn. While I was working at a school, I'd sit at my desk between classes, studying away like a maniac. And at weekends, I'd hop in my dilapidated Toyota and venture off into the countryside to explore. Now, on one such trip, I wanted to drive to Nagano to see the cheeky snow monkeys that I'd read so much about in Japan travel pamphlets and get the coveted bragging
That monkey
photos
looked
on my
unamused.
Facebook page so sorely deserved. Now, the only problem was the snow monkeys are about 6 or 7 hours drive south. And when driving those
6
kind of
or
distances
7.
in Japan,
That's a
you
lot.
have an important decision to make. Number 1, do you take the tolled highways and go bankrupt? Or number 2, drive on regular roads and spend 1,000 years trapped behind a slow-moving K-car. With highways, the journey to the snow monkeys can be done in 4 hours. Without, it's a solid 8. So unfortunately,
Good
I
God.
did go for option number 1. So off I went for 4 hours, shooting down the bankruptcy highway to go and look at some monkeys sitting in some water. And after a long drive, praying that my rickety car wouldn't fall apart en route, I came to the highway toll booth to pay in cash and, drive off to my freedom. But to my horror, amidst the fatigue from driving, I made a fatal error. I accidentally drove into the wrong exit. At highway tolls in Japan, you have 2 exits. Number 1, you pay with cash, or number 2, you use an ETC card reader, basically an NFC chip that you slot your credit card into that instantly pays when you arrive, and you can sort of go through seamlessly. This thing's brilliant. It's like a magic, and I didn't have one. So I've driven into the wrong exit, and as I go to reverse, I look in the mirror, and I see there's 3 or 4 cars piled up behind me, waiting in the queue, probably wondering, what the hell's going on? Why isn't this idiot moving? Why isn't the fucking barrier going up? And as I poke my head out the window, I'm sort of giving, a half-assed apology, like, oh, sumimasen, against a backdrop of incessant honking for all the cars. And I'm really starting to panic now because I feel utterly helpless. I can't reverse, I can't get through the barrier, nobody seems to be bloody coming to help. Until eventually, after a lifetime, a man comes running over, my saviour by all accounts, and he's panicking just as much as I am. Panicking because this highway toll booth that normally runs like clockwork has just descended into this absolute clusterfuck of a situation.
Nah, I'd be
so he comes
panicking.
over, running, panting, and he shouts out to me, "Genki desu ka? Are you okay?" And he presses the button and the barrier goes up. The castle gates are finally open. And I turn to him, relieved, and give a resilient thumbs up. Like, yeah, Genki desu, I'm good, I'm okay, thank you so much. To which he points to the barrier and says, "Ja, hai, dozo, this way please, go that way." And, I'm so damn grateful. I'm like, "Arigatou gozaimasu, thank you so much." As I full throttle it, drive through the raised barrier, and down the off-ramp away from the highway to victory. And amidst my relief at escaping, I realised the man had let me off paying. I hadn't paid anything for this highway toll. A few thousand yen, you know. What an incredible twist of good fortune, right? Now, some people call this thing gaijin smash, literally foreigner smash, where you can break the rules and get away with doing shit like this. Which, of course, is something I don't want to advocate. You know, I've tried to make every effort to integrate here and play by the rules, and you should too. And when I got back to work on Monday, I bragged to some colleagues that I'd gotten away with it. Like, this is stupid. Through my own brazen stupidity, I'd actually saved a few thousand yen. And they were like, oh, Sugoi, haha, well done, Chris-san, you're a genius. And I was like, of course I am. I'm a king, a champion of people. And that was until 2 months later when it turned out that wasn't the case.
No.
One day, as I was sitting at my desk working through a new list of Japanese vocabulary, I discovered to my absolute horror that the word for cash in Japanese is genkin. Genkin. Oh God. Immediately, I cast my mind back to the highway toll incident and relived that conversation.
He said he
when
paid,
the man had come
basically.
running over, panting, stressed, concerned, he'd raised the toll booth gate, pointed beyond it to the side of the road for me to pull over, and of course pay in cash, and said, oh, genkin desu ka? Are you paying cash? But I looked at him with a smile and gone, yeah, genki desu. Hit full throttle and fucked off down the highway, leaving him to stand in the exhaust fumes of my dilapidated Toyota, wondering probably why the bloody hell hadn't I paid? Why had I just disappeared off down the highway? Oh my God. I realised it was less gaijin smash, more gaijin dickhead. My unrelenting stupidity had saved me a few thousand yen, probably $50, while not exactly portraying foreigners in the greatest light and probably shaking that man's confidence in all things foreign. To absolve my sins, I did donate that money that I owed to a local charity for the Tohoku Disaster Relief Fund. But I think born out of that fear
that's
of becoming a petty foreign
It was an
criminal,
honest mistake,
that event
though.
did become like a catalyst for me to study Japanese really damn hard, a lot quicker than I'd certainly initially planned. So what's the moral of our first story? Number one, don't go and see the snow monkeys.
Monkeys make you
Two,
commit
don't make
crimes.
assumptions. You've gaijin smashed your way through when you absolutely haven't. But if you think that's bad, get ready for our next big mistake involving a catastrophic meal at a high-end Tokyo sushi restaurant that I quite honestly rather forget. And
Because
speaking
this
of
is
big
one of
mistakes,
those-
imagine...
Yeah, no, that's...
That one's coming up. That's going to be a serious one too, because there is a way, like a specific way you have to eat your sushi.
Yeah.
And stuff. But that toll booth, that kind of remind me. I did something similar to that, but I got into the, I guess the fast pass lane or whatever, and I didn't know what fast pass was at the time, so I just saw that you could keep going, so I was like, I'll just keep going. Why stop when you can just keep going?
Mm-hmm.
So I did that, and yeah. But they bill you in the mail, so that was...
Yeah, that's a little different.
Yeah. It wasn't that much, but it was still one of those where it's like, once I passed, I was like, oh, shit. It's too late.
Man,
But
that's
yeah.
rough, though. That's rough, but it's still... Like the initial
That
thing
poor
about,
man working, though.
about just being because you're a foreigner and because you... I mean, he didn't intentionally do that. He really did just not really fully understand what he told him to do, but... It's still like I get it. I would feel bad about that too. I would have been panicking the whole time when I couldn't go anywhere. Like, oh well, fuck me.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Yeah.
So I don't blame him for that one at all.
Travelling around Japan without protecting your online privacy or being able to watch your favourite TV shows because they're locked away
We
in a
got the
different region.
NordVPN
Well, that
sponsor.
is where today's sponsor,
Yeah.
ExpressVPN, comes
Oh,
in.
ExpressVPN.
ExpressVPN is an app that
All right, we're
tuna,
gonna.
the oily texture of flame-grilled salmon, and I love devouring fish eggs and juicy fresh shrimp. Honestly, I probably eat sushi once or twice a month. But what I don't do is eat out at high-end sushi restaurants. Not just because you have to sell your house to be able to afford it, but because of a not-so-good experience that I had that scared me away forever.
Oh, no.
Oh no. Not the sushi incident.
Once upon a time, I had a meeting with a very important Japanese businessman, quite a powerful guy. This was a few years ago now, back when it looked like the Abroad in Japan channel was going places. Not like now, where I am, of course, a negative Nelly, a whining William. You are shallow-minded snowflake Englishman who is as plain as white bread.
Whoa.
As plain as white bread. I fucking love white bread. But unfortunately, when these important, powerful business people realised that Abroad in Japan wasn't so much a slick production company as it was just me moping around on a floor, that phase certainly didn't last very long. However, on this occasion, I had a lunchtime appointment with someone who was very important. Now, the thing about higher-end sushi restaurants is you always sit at a bar counter, right? And the chef literally towers over you, putting the food down before you, watching you eat with an unblinking gaze. And that's my first problem with high-end sushi restaurants. It feels less like fine dining and more like an interrogation at a war crimes tribunal. As you're probably aware, in Japanese culture, there's a real emphasis on showing appreciation for food and never being critical. It's not like the UK, where if the waiter asks you, how was your smoked salmon, wilderberry souffle, you are allowed to sort of go, oh, well, this dish, for lack of a better word, was quite shit. Now, in a Japanese restaurant, providing it's not a chain restaurant, if the restaurant staff ask, oh, how's the food? Even if it tastes like something out of a farmyard slop bucket, you would still lie and say, oh, it's delicious, it's a game changer, I loved it. Oh yeah, amazing. Otherwise, it's considered quite rude and awkward. And so when you go to a top-class restaurant, that atmosphere is magnified, right? Because these are very proud chefs at the top of their game, serving impossibly rare ingredients, like the unobtainium of the fish world. And when you go for an omakase course, literally chef's decision, to question their food and to question what they serve can feel like committing a crime. So I want you to bear that in mind when I tell this story, because in a bit you'll hear it and go, oh, I wonder why he didn't just say, I don't want to eat that, to the chef. So it's midday and I go to this restaurant in Ginza, high-end district in Tokyo, and I go inside and it's really dark and dimly lit, except for the wooden counter, which is illuminated with the good old top-down lighting that you find in sushi restaurants. And I sit down and meet the guy who we'll call Saito-san. And he's like, good to see you, Chris-san. I've ordered the unrelenting 45 fucking dish omakase course. And I'm like, oh yes, very good, can't wait. And eye up all the nice cuts of fish in the glass counter at the bar. I already know I'm in a little bit of trouble because I'm not that adventurous when it comes to eating sushi. When the chef asks, is there anything you don't like? I say no, I'm good for everything. Just because I don't know what there is. I've never eaten at a high-end sushi restaurant before. And in hindsight, what I should have said is, I'll eat anything as long as it's salmon. So the course kicks off and it's pretty good. We have some rich miso soup broth, and one of the first courses is an assortment of buttery rich fatty tuna. And once each plate of sushi is crafted lovingly by the chef, it's placed down before me for me to sort of look and go, wow, it's amazing, better than Christ. And I pop them in my mouth one by one. And as I'm eating the sushi, the chef, who's this pretty big, serious, stern-looking middle-aged man, just stands and watches in silence as I eat each piece one by one, while he ominously clutches what can only be described as a bloody sword, right? Like the knives they use to fillet these fish are pretty damn big. It looks like something out of Lord of the Rings.
Get the
like
chef's
Aragorn
knife.
and he's swinging it around. I'm just like, oh yeah, delicious. But I'm being studied by both him and Saito-san to ensure that I appreciate these culinary wonders, which thankfully, at this point, I do, because it's tuna, and everyone likes tuna. Now, there's one important detail that I've left out until now, and that is that I'd been out drinking the night before, so I might be a little bit hungover. Stomach isn't great, but I'm relieved everything's got off to a good start, and I can sort of feel my stomach go, oh, this is nice, but I don't really want any food right now. Can you just sort of let me have a few hours off? And I'm like, no, we've got to get through this for all parties involved. No. I've got to prove that I'm sophisticated. I've got to prove that I'm not a whining William.
A whining
the next
William
piece is Ika, squid. And I know it sounds daring, but it's not. It's a little bit translucent, a little bit chewy.
I like squid.
But with a brush of soy sauce and a pinch of wasabi, it tastes great. And I put it in my mouth and the chef asks, oh, it's delicious, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, oishi, delicious. And the chef's like, of course it is, of course it's delicious. Then things start to go wrong. Because I witness a dish that I've never seen before, that Saito-san correctly identifies as mirugai, or as it's known in English, gooey duck. A gigantic saltwater clam that's popular in China and Japan and genuinely looks like a prop out of the movie Alien. Also, it pains me to admit it, but for the longest time, I thought gooey duck was pronounced geoduck, because that's how it's bloody spelt. And thinking it was called geoduck, always helped me through the process of eating it because it sounded like a Pokemon, right? I could look at this unpalatable, just horrible thing.
Not the Geoduck.
Oh, Geoduck. That's cute. I'll eat it. Yeah. Oh, no. No, it's called Gooey Duck. Gooey Duck.
That doesn't sound appetizing.
No,
And if you learn just a single useful thing from this damn video, it's how to pronounce the one dish you simply need to avoid. But the chef sticks this gooey duck in front of me, and he's like, "Oh, mirugai desu," and I'm like, "Oh, yeah." It looks very bad. From the unnatural shape of it alone, I know things are about to go downhill. Nevertheless,
wait. So did he have to eat the full gooey duck, or did they slice it and put it on sushi?
I have no idea.
Because it's making it sound like they was like, here,
Yeah.
eat the Geoduck.
Yeah.
less. Itadakimasu. Let's go. My God, I put it in my mouth and it tastes chewier than expired Wrigley's chewing gum, like a flavourless lump of plastic dredged from the depths of the Dead Sea. To my horror, I start to feel like my mouth salivate. You know, when your mouth fills up with saliva because your body knows the bad things are about to go down.
Yeah.
But of course, the chef is standing there with his
Your mouth's
Lord of the
sweating.
Rings knife, and he's like, "Oh, oishi desho, it's delicious." And I'm like, "Oh yes, it's gooey duck. It's amazing. It's a game changer." It's not. It's shit. Luckily, there was some piping hot green tea there, and I thought maybe I can take a swig of that. Maybe I can wash the flavour out my mouth, or better still, eradicate my taste buds out of existence and then just get through this. But I took a swig of it, and it made it 1,000 times worse, because now I've got the taste of the fishy chewing gum mess with the bitter green matcha tea. No, it doesn't work, and it just made it worse. Somehow, against the odds, I swallow the gooey duck and keep my composure, give a sort of a thumbs up to Saito-san and to the chef, and they're like, "Yep, good stuff," and move on, while I'm like gagging. However, the chef seemed to take my approval of the gooey duck as a signal to press ahead into the abyss of food.
Oh no.
Because next up we get akagai, arc shell clam, which again looks like a face hugger from the movie Alien. And the problem with akagai is, in terms of flavour, there's just no redeeming quality to this fish. I don't understand why people eat this. Just looking at it alone, I feel physically sick. And I'm like, oh, I'll get through it. I take it, put it in my mouth all in one go, and quickly realise what's left of the meal was now basically just an endurance test of my own mental strength. Now, if you want to experience the taste of akagai at home in a reasonably priced environment, cut up a Bridgestone tyre, drag it across a beach in the sand, because not only does it have the texture of rubber, but there's this horrible crunchiness to it. When you bite in, there's like bits of crunchiness, like
kind of like
there's rock or sand or salt or something in
God,
there.
ew.
And of course, the chef is like, "Oishi desho, delicious, right?" And I'm like, "Mine, delicious, yeah, kill me." In between doing bloody breathing exercises just to get through this.
No.
I swallow the damn thing whole and take a swig of what's left of my matcha green tea. And by now my stomach's like, "All right, you've had your fun. Can you just like stop now?" And at this point I'm, like a robber in a bank heist, looking around for the door, looking for the exit, looking for where the toilet is, just so I can run away and escape this onslaught of awful. But then the final dish comes out.
Oh no.
And I know I'm fucked. Sazai horned turban sea snail, placed before me in its shell. And this isn't something you can just sort of reach down and pop in your mouth. To get to the edible bit, you need your chopsticks to fork in there and twist it and pull it and bop it. And if you ever get to this moment with your chopsticks pinched around this rubbery snail that you have to tug out of the shell, that's the moment of realisation of just how stuffed you really are. I twist it out, and I think at this point my hand must have been shaking, because I know, with this in my mouth, this is the final blow. There's no turning back. I pop it in, start to chew, and I do that thing, when you tap your foot, and you're like, fucking get up, man. Because my legs are like one step ahead. They know it's time to escape. And the chef's like, "Oishi desu, it's delicious, right?" And I'm like, nodding away as I feel my mouth flood with saliva. And then I'm like,
Not the hot spit.
I just need the toilet. And the chef looks thoroughly unimpressed, because it's a bit rude to leave the counter while you're still chewing this award-winning dish. But I slip away to the toilet, and what goes down in there is best left to the imagination. But the worst part of it is, the toilet was so close to the counter that everything that transpired within that toilet in that 5-minute window
heard.
would have been audible to the chef, to Saito-san, and to the other occupants of the restaurant. Ah, God, just thinking about it makes me cringe and want to die. This was something that was abundantly clear when I returned to the counter to Saito-san's concerned face and him sort of going, "Oh, daijoubu, Chris-san, are you okay?" And the stony-faced chef still clutching his knife. Oh, God. Suffice to say, we hastily ordered the bill, and I never saw the restaurant nor Saito-san ever again after we parted ways. So what is the moral of the story? What's the mistake? Well, I think there's 3 things here. Number 1, do your homework and learn all the food that you don't want at a sushi restaurant. Maybe it's sea snails, maybe it's shellfish and facehuggers and gooey duck. But if it doesn't come out, it's not an issue, right? So don't be bold like me, just say no. Number 2, avoid high-end sushi restaurants with the bar counter, unless you really love sushi and want that experience. But I personally don't like the bar counter, having them stare there. Not
I wouldn't
fun.
like that
And number
either.
3, the
No.
most important lesson of all, don't consume sushi on a hangover.
No.
Don't ever do that.
Oh no.
I forgot there
The
was
third and final story is probably the most embarrassing for me. Not because it involves a mistake, it's just more of an admission of guilt and a life lesson that's, I think, universal across the board. Just over a
boy.
year ago, I was very lucky to spend a week with Japan's biggest movie star, Ken Watanabe.
Good God.
Hey,
Hi, gozaimasu. Ken-san.
nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
Chris,
you.
yeah.
As seen in everything from The Last Samurai and Inception to Godzilla and Tokyo Vice. He's an incredible actor, and for the best part of a decade, I joked on here that the day I met him, the day I sat down and had a coffee with him, would be the day I would leave Japan, because I would have completed Japan. I would have done everything there is to do. And then rather awkwardly it happened, and it went pretty damn well. Now, first off, you don't mess with Ken Watanabe. There's a reason he's cast as a samurai warlord or a Japanese billionaire who wants to steal things. He's a scary man, so much so that when you tell him that you find him scary, he makes you feel even more scared.
Pretty nervous. It's a bit scary.
Why?
I'm scared to meet you, Ken. Why? Why are you afraid? I mean, I've run into some viewers of the Abroad in Japan channel before who seem nervous to encounter me for whatever reason. And when they go, "Oh, I'm a bit anxious to meet you, Chris," I don't go, "Why? Why are you afraid?" Ah! Although, I definitely will do that from now on. But I met Ken a few hours before we started shooting the documentary in his cafe, the K-Port, in the town of Kesunuma. And for my first meeting with Ken, he came in and he said hello to everyone, and he signed some photos for some waiting fans. And then he came over and just pretty much sat down next to me and said, "Hello, nice to meet you. Let's have some pizza." And it was very surreal. I was in this dreamlike state. I basically felt like I was in fucking Inception. Not just because I was a bit sort of shocked to be in the presence of Ken Watanabe all of a sudden, but mainly because such was my anxiety in the run-up to shooting the documentary. The night before, I had, give or take 4 minutes sleep. So I was pretty dead. Now, when you have that initial small talk with someone in Japan called aisatsu, greetings, it does often follow a similar structure or pattern, especially if you're not Japanese. Questions include, why did you come to Japan? What do you do? How old are you? And how long have you been living here, right? This small talk has to happen, not because conversation in Japan is boring, but because it's important to establish your position in the hierarchy, like, establishing the senpai-kohai relationship in simple terms. And if
Right.
you're older, you're instantly the winner, so well done, you've won that hierarchy, for better or worse. But the second most important question, perhaps, is how long have you lived in Japan? And they ask that because they want to know, how good is your Japanese? How good should they expect your Japanese to be? Naturally, if you say, I've been here a year or 2 or 3, there's an expectation that your Japanese is appalling and you're given some room to manoeuvre. When you've lived here 10 years, naturally the bar is a little bit higher, rightly so. Which presents a problem for me because in many ways, my Japanese isn't that good. In fact, it's probably worse now than it was 5 or 6 years ago. Rewind back to the great highway toll booth robbery. Genki desu. That event was the catalyst for me studying Japanese really hard, and I did go all out. Morning, day, night, I studied kanji, I studied grammar, vocabulary, to the point that in 2 years, I was able to be kind of conversationally fluent and even win a Japanese speech contest, memorising an entire 15-minute speech word for word and delivering it to an audience of 100 people. Something I never thought I would ever be able to do, and a testament to how bloody hard I worked on my Japanese at the time. But 2 years in, it was incredibly rewarding, speaking with students and staff and friends, and everybody was really impressed how far I'd managed to go within 2 years, including me, right? I felt immensely proud when people asked, how long have you lived in Japan? And I could be like, 2 years. And they'd be like, whoa, Nihongo jozu, genuinely, that's pretty good. And if I'd carried on at that pace, I would be extremely good at Japanese, probably able to speak at a native speaker level. It would be magical. But then, I stopped. I quit my job as a teacher, I left a working environment where I used Japanese all day, every day, and I threw my eggs in the YouTuber basket, where unfortunately Japanese isn't really needed in everyday life. And thus, my Japanese never progressed. Like my rusting Toyota Starler, dilapidated and crumbling away on a driveway. So too did my Japanese abilities. Sure, I can still hold a conversation and get by, but there is a disappointing gulf between where my Japanese is and where it should be, and where it could be. And with each and every passing year, when people ask how long I've lived in Japan, that bragging and that pride that I once had has crumbled away into embarrassment, to the point that 6 or 7 years in, I'm ashamed to admit, I started to conveniently forget how long that I'd lived in Japan. People ask, Chris-san, how long have you lived here in Japan? And I'd be like, I don't know, maybe 3, maybe 4 years. I've forgotten now. It's gone. Awful. It's awful. I know. And I imagine some of these people are confused when they look up abroad in Japan on Wikipedia and discover that I've been here since 2012. Like, wow, that abroad in Japan guy is sure shit at maths. But I did it because I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed, and I wanted to make sure that the Japanese person I'm speaking with doesn't assume that I'm really good at Japanese and go on to use advanced vocabulary that I won't be able to follow or keep up with. So, there's method to the madness. So when Ken Watanabe and I are sitting there eating a pizza, his favourite mushroom and asparagus pizza, with his homemade spicy sauce, he's like, Chris-san, how many years have you lived in Japan? And I was like, shit, I can't lie to Ken Watanabe. But then if I say 10 years, maybe he'll assume I'm very good, and all of our interview will be in Japanese, to the detriment to the documentary. It could compromise the dynamic. So I did say, well, Ken, I think I must have been here 5, maybe 6 years now. Yeah, I forget. It must be 5 or 6. And he sort of looked a bit puzzled that I myself didn't know how long I'd physically been in Japan. And he gave a sort of, nod, before going on to munching on his pizza. Fast forward to the next evening, and we've just wrapped our first day of shooting. It's gone pretty well. And for the most part, Ken and I speak in English, but when he's answering heavy-hitting interview questions, he does gravitate towards Japanese, so he can express himself fully. But we're sitting at a restaurant and having a dinner with all the movers and shakers of Kesanuma town, and the atmosphere felt more like a king returning from a battle, holding a court, as opposed to a mere dinner. But it was a lot of fun, and one of the main people I got speaking to was the owner of the local sake brewery, a really nice guy called Sugawara-san. But Sugawara-san spoke good English, and he came over, and after a minute or so, he was inevitably like, so Chris-san, how many years have you been living here in Japan? And before I delivered my answer, I did my usual, conveniently forgetting how long I've been here thing. I went, how long? 5.
Different time.
But before I could deliver my answer, from the other side of the room, filled with people in this noisy restaurant, I heard the deep, booming, terrifying voice of Ken Watanabe say, 10年間住んでました. Daijoubu. 10 years. He's lived here 10 years. It's okay. You can speak Japanese. And I look over and he gives me a knowing look. A look that I'd seen in The Last Samurai when he chopped off that guy's head. Or Inception when he finds out that Leonardo DiCaprio screwed him over. I'd been caught in the act. I don't know how he found out how long I'd lived in Japan. I don't know how he'd got through my lies. But with my face gone bright red like a fucking strawberry, I gave a sort of sheepish nod as if to sort of acknowledge like, oh yeah, I've been rumbled, I've been done. And then went back to speaking to Sugawara-san, this time in Japanese. I'd been found out. And for the rest of the week off camera, Ken did speak to me more or less exclusively in Japanese. Thankfully, it did go on to become one of the better documentaries I've been lucky to produce on abroad in Japan. But what's the moral of the story here? I think the moral is don't give up learning Japanese like I did. Honestly, that might be one of the few regrets I've had in all my time living here. I should have carried on, even if it was in some small way. I should have carried on my studies. And number 2, most importantly of all, don't lie to Ken Watanabe, because he'll find out some way or another, and then you'll get to see the scary face.
I wouldn't want to.
So guys, what was the worst mistake of the 3? Let me know in the description box below. And I do actually have a book coming out revealing more horrendous
I think I
stories like
heard
this
that
of my
he made
times
a book.
living in Japan. You can find the details in the description box below, but it's available for pre-order now. More on that in a future video. And of course, for more behind the scenes content, check out the Abroad Japan Patreon. There's over 50 bonus videos on there you can check out right now. But for now...
There we go. Well, you guys heard him. Be sure to go check that out.
The look had the disappointing father look, and that's...
Yeah, but I would say I think the second one was definitely the worst one.
The sushi one.
You had every tool possible to not let that happen.
Yeah. And you went there hungover.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Outside of that, outside of everything, and it is what you just said, but you could have rescheduled.
Yeah,
here.
That's simple. Yeah, I can't make it. Can we reschedule for maybe the next day or sometime next week? Anything like that would have been better, and then you would have had a clearer head to be like, no, I can't. I don't want these 5 things on any of my sushi, please. The first one was literally that was truly just a mistake. You didn't know enough Japanese at the time under the circumstances to know what you did wrong until afterwards, and you did your best to redeem that by not keeping that money that you could have spent, and you did something good about that. The third one, I mean, you were just so used to lying, and you just kind of did that just to save yourself, just in case. And I get that, because I would do the same thing probably in that situation, just to be like, I don't want anyone to think that I should be fluent in Japanese and that I'm not. So I'm just gonna
and especially
give myself the
leeway.
leeway.
Documentary, because for most people, and it doesn't matter where in the world you are to do it, it's just a good practice to read up on who you're going to be talking to. And that's probably what he did. He did his research and figured out who Chris was. Yeah. So kind of had some backup points in case the conversation was lacking. He could ask about him. Yeah. And stuff. And it's that look... That look hurt me.
Y'all be sure to let us know which of the 3 mistakes you think was the worst one. We will catch y'all for the next video. Bye.